Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to my channel. I am Imani, the writer, and today marks the first day of my reviews. Yes! I'm super excited. The story that I read for today is popping, y'all. Alright, so quick summary of this story. It's called The Cafe by Mimi, also known as Queen Mimi on Instagram, where you can follow her for more original content. So The Cafe is about the narrator slash protagonist, which I believe to be Mimi herself, on a train trip, a road trip, hey! And throughout this road trip, she thinks introspectively about herself while coming to the realization of the beauty of nature that she has a newfound respect for it that she just did not have before through the beautiful scenery that she gets to be enamored with on her beautiful, awesome train ride. And the characters she meets are pretty interesting as well. They're quite the characters. So let's jump right into the review. Number one, do I care about these characters? When I ask questions like this, I really am talking about the main characters and maybe secondary characters, not characters that are kind of just, they're there, but they're not even given a name or a personality, they're just there, you know what I'm saying? I'm really focusing on the main characters and maybe secondary characters. And as this is a short story, usually short stories have about 1 to 2, maybe 3 main characters. For this question, I would give it 7 glow points and 3 grow points. Mainly because Mimi's the only interesting character throughout the I don't want to say interesting, but she's like the one character that we really see and understand and come to terms with and connect with. And yeah, I like her. I like it. I care about it. I care about what happens to her in the story. I care about her experiences. Now, the reason why I give it 3 grow points is because there are ways to make it even easier for the reader to care about your main characters. So the way to make them care even more is through stakes. So what that means is your character would be the center of a certain conflict, and they would have something to lose. It doesn't have to be like a crazy loss, it doesn't have to be anything crazy. It doesn't even have to be a physical loss. It could be just an emotional loss. But the point is that they have something to lose, and they are the center of conflict. It's a lot easier to empathize with somebody, especially characters in books or movies or wherever, if there's a conflict and there's something to lose and something to gain too. And I give it 3 grow points just because that's not really something I really saw throughout the story. Like, the main character is super interesting. I really love the inner dialogue. However, I don't really feel like there was too much conflict. There was inner conflict, of course, but there wasn't too much external conflict, and I don't feel like at any point would the character have anything to lose or really anything to gain. Well, she did have something to gain. She found a newfound respect for nature, so she does have something to gain, but I just don't think she had anything to lose in the first place. So that's why I give it that score. Next question. Do these characters develop in a believable way at a seemingly natural pace? I give it 9 glow points and 1 grow points. I definitely feel like the main character developed in a beautiful way. It made a lot of sense. So in the beginning, she was kind of cold, kind of sad. She kind of has that, that vibe where you just kind of want to be left alone, and it's dark, and it's, you know what I'm saying? that's how she is in the beginning. But then when she comes across all these beautiful sceneries with nature, with trees and grass and mountains and the sunset and everything, she just basically develops into a much more happier person, I feel like, or somebody who just has a lot more respect for the things we take for granted that come about because of nature. And I see herself growing to be more happier by the end of the story. The next question is, are all characters necessary and fulfill their role to drive the plot? I gave it 5 glow points and 5 grow points. And the reason why is because I feel like the only character that really drives the plot is the narrator herself. I don't really feel like the other characters did as much for the plot. What they were there for, in my opinion, is to shed light on the qualities and internal dialogue and just the personality of the narrator herself. Like, they just existed to aid her in her glowing moments, you know what I'm saying? Which is all fine and dandy, that's great. But like, I feel like if you're going to have new characters, they should not simply exist just to support the main. They should support the plot. They should support the story as a whole, which is why I gave it that score. My next question is the writing style understandable and creative? I put 9 glow and 1 grow point. And I would have given it a perfect 10 if it weren't for a very, very, very small but crucial grammar issue. Like, of course, throughout the entire story, her word choice is beautiful, her descriptions are beautiful, they're very clever, they're very creative, and for the most part, the story is very legible, it's very grammatically correct, but this one grammar issue is still very crucial. But I feel like everybody goes through a phase where they just don't realize it as much. It took me forever before I realized I was doing it, and it's really hard to get rid of the habit. But I urge you guys to listen and to try and make sure not to continue this habit. Now, when you have a verb, you usually put the verb in a certain tense, as either present tense or past tense or future tense or even other tenses in between. When you have a story, it's very important that you're consistent with the tenses because they relate to time. For example, so I pulled up a quote from the story to explain what I mean by switching tenses. It's really important to be consistent. So in the first few lines of the story, it reads, "The train is moving out of the station," and then the last line of that paragraph, it reads, "I didn't want to be on this train." So the "is" in the sentence before is present tense. But the problem is, "didn't" is in the past tense. So saying the train is moving means it's happening as we speak. It's literally moving right in front of me. But didn't means I did not want to get on, which has the connotation that the train has already passed, it has already been there, and I didn't want to get on, which it's a very minor thing, but it's really, really important that you are consistent with your tenses. Now, it's okay to switch tenses every now and then when it's necessary, because there are times when you're writing a story, the whole thing is in present tense, but then you start talking about something that happened in the past that you didn't write about already. You're talking about something in the past. And then it's okay to use the past tense, but it's not okay to just switch them up, you know what I mean? Without really being consistent about what's happening, because it relates to time and how the story is flowing in the space of time. Does that make any sense? I really hope that makes sense. But like I said, it's a very small problem, and it's a very common problem. I had to it was super hard for me to break this habit because I didn't even realize that was a thing. You don't really realize you're doing it. So what I suggest, and I still do it too, so what I suggest is I would read the story out loud to try and catch those times where the tenses of verbs are inconsistent. My next question was, are all the scenes necessary and fulfilled their roles to drive the plot? I gave it 6 glow points and 4 row points. Despite the fact that this story is called The Cafe, a very short amount of time is actually spent in the cafe in the story, and personally, in my opinion, the small amount of time that's there is the least significant out of all of the entirety of the story, because the majority of the story is, her looking out her window and being in awe by what she's seeing and flexing her imaginative muscles and thinking about the possibilities of what could be happening in nature. For instance, there's this witch. She's driving past in the train and she sees this forest, she sees the trees, and she thinks she sees a house there, and she imagines in her mind that there's a sorceress living in that house. And basically she's just flexing her imaginative muscles based on the inspiration of the scenery in front of her, based on all the nature in front of her. That's the biggest part I got out of the story. Most of it was just nature, you know what I'm saying? And nothing that happened in the cafe had anything to do with nature, really. The most important thing that I got from the cafe was the exchange, the very small exchange she had with a man there, who, they were ordering food from the cafe, and he catches Mimi's eye, he catches the narrator's eye, and all that stuff. I won't spoil it too much for you guys if you guys want to read it later. But that was the most important exchange that I saw in the cafe. But like I said, a very small amount of time is actually in the cafe, and that's the title. So I just want to stress that, be careful about what you title your stories, because, they have to have some real significance. And I saw more significance in nature than I did in the cafe. And furthermore, most of the scenes are very introspective. They're very she's just thinking a lot just about the world and herself. It's very introspective. It's very much inner dialogue. Most of the story is really just about her and her thoughts. And so some of the events that don't have anything to do with her introspection and her thought processes, I don't necessarily feel like they fulfill their role to drive the plot. I was also a bit confused with the Amish woman scene. There is a pretty Amish woman in her pretty little dress, but she seemed really sad. And, the narrator's just staring at her and just feeling bad for her and wanting to help. But they don't exchange any words. Now, it's a very beautiful scene. I like it a lot, but like I said, it doesn't really fit in with the rest of the story because it's such an introspective story discussing nature and, using her imagination and her being in awe of something that she really took for granted before, something she barely respected before. She could have cared less about nature. The narrator could have cared less about nature in the beginning, but now she just found she basically just fell in love with it, and that scene just didn't really fit in with the rest. Most of the scenes do drive the plot, and the strongest scenes were the ones where she's having that inner dialogue with herself.